your story. Maybe you haven't been sure where to tell it or how to tell it. If you really have a Windrush generation story that you really feel needs to be told, or you just would enjoy telling it, maybe it's a story that you think will interest people and has all sorts of, just like every life has really drama and pathos and excitement and disappointment and adventure and hardship and all the other things about it, then please do feel free to board our bus. We'd absolutely love to have you and have your company and hear your story. And that's why we're there this morning outside Hackney Town Hall waiting to talk to you. Let's go to Andy in Morden. He's ringing about our new spaces, these 24,000 empty business properties in London. Andy, good morning to you.
Yeah, hello, good morning, Vanessa.
Hiya.
Now, the thing that it's freaking out to me is that if there's 24,000 business properties empty within London, I'll bet you that a lot of those are way overpriced for the businesses that could be in them. Mm-hmm. The landlords are being too greedy, the owners are being too greedy, or the rates are too high. Now, although it's a very laudable project to turn them into temporary accommodation for people that are homeless, and, it's happened around here in Morden, what it does is it creates problems for people on business estates, not only for the business owners because they've got to carry on their businesses, they've got to have their big lorries going in and rubbish being taken away and, the general stuff that goes on around a business estate, but also for the people that end up living in this temporary accommodation. Merton have got temporary accommodation in an office block on the Willow Lane industrial estate. And you've got mums in buggies and you've got elderly people that can't get around very well that are in this sort of temporary accommodation, and they've got to back in and out of the way that vehicles are parked, and it just doesn't work. For me, it doesn't work. And once these business premises go, that's it. They've gone. They ain't ever going to come back to business use.
So as far as you're concerned, you would, if you were a council, you'd deploy what? Various kind of individuals to start researching this and get onto it quickly and fast?
Yeah, do it properly, look into it properly. I'm not saying all business properties shouldn't be turned into accommodation, because there are plenty that you see that used to be shops on street corners or in back streets that have been turned into houses, into places to live. But when it's on industrial estates and the industrial estates get nibbled away at the edges, and like I say, once that sort of premises for businesses is gone, then it's gone. If you want to travel 50, 60 miles to get your car serviced at a reasonable cost, then that's what's going to happen. Or get whatever service you need, if that's going to happen, or you can end up paying a lot of money for it. This is a stopgap, sticking plaster version of the housing policy, when really central government and local governments, they need to grasp the ball by the horns and start build places for people to live in. This is probably almost as dire as post-war, post-First and Second World War for people, where we are going backwards. We are absolutely going backwards to where my parents were in the 1960s, living in one floor of a Victorian house and having shared facilities with the people downstairs with a tin bath in front of the fire. It just ain't on.
Thank you very much, Andy. All right, we'll be back with you after the travel news.
Disruption continues for all services in and out of King's Cross at the moment. Grand Central, Great Northern, Hull trains, London North Eastern Railway and Thameslink, following an earlier incident on the line between Peterborough and Stevenage. The line's reopened, but the delays are going to be over an hour for quite some time. Greater Anglia and TfL rail services between Liverpool Street and Shenfield still running with severe delays following overrunning engineering work. South Western Railway services via Rains Park are running with delays of 15 minutes London bound following an earlier passenger illness, and also there are delays continuing and up to 10 minutes on services via Clarendon due to some local speed restrictions. Still a bit busy on the A2 East Rochester Way, heading westbound into Bexley Heath from the M25 Junction 2 interchange at Darrenth following an earlier breakdown. Northbound traffic on the Blackwall Tunnel Southern Approach easing now from the Woolwich Road flyover. Traffic on the A13 easing too into Barking coming up from Rainham. The Connaught Bridge remains closed for maintenance work. Traffic for City Airport still on diversion. Traffic on the highway slow westbound through Wapping helping towards Tower Hill. That's looking very busy. And the North Circular slow into the A40 at the Hanger Lane Directory system, with northbound delays to Ealing Common. Southbound is heavy back through Park Royal. Central London, traffic on the A40 Westway starting to build quite suddenly eastbound from Paddington onto a busy Marylebone flyover. Pippa Sparks, BBC Radio London. Your next travel at 9.
This is London.
You can hear the things that are happening in your city that you may or may not know about.
Eddie Nestor.
If you've heard about them before, you can feed into the conversation from your own personal experience. And if you've never heard them before, then at the end of the show, you're better informed. That's what we are. It's a one-stop shop for London news.
Eddie Nestor's Drive Time. Weekday afternoons from 4. This is BBC Radio London.
And on the line is Olivia in Brockley. Hi, Olivia. Morning to you.
Oh, hi, V. How are you?
I'm all right. And also great to hear from you on the subject of civil partnerships, which for the first time will be available for heterosexual couples. And I think lots of people struggling with this. They just don't get it. They think if you don't want to get married in a church or a synagogue or mosque or any kind of religious ceremony, then go to a registry office. What do you need a civil partnership for? But you get this one, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I really get it. Civil partnerships for heterosexual couples, I think, is brilliant and really exciting.
Explain why.
Well, it's funny you say that about the marriage thing, because I did exactly what you've just suggested. So I am married. So personally, I married my husband a few years back. We didn't want to have a religious ceremony. We got married in a registry office.
Yeah.
Fine. You know, I didn't change my name as a feminist. That wasn't something I was going to do. My mum gave a speech. We did all the things that you're saying. You can kind of break the rules of marriage if you want to, the kind of tradition and the baggage that you were talking about earlier. Yeah. And you can have a sort of legal ceremony, and you can sort of make it as you want it to be currently, I guess, at least sort of symbolically. But I think the thing is, you're sort of at least aware at that point that you're being forced to break and challenge and ditch that convention, because the history of marriage still carries all of that stuff with it.
Tell me what it was that you because we kept hearing Fiona Miller earlier. You know, she's Alistair Campbell's partner, saying marriage was not for me. It was not for me. She said it was such kind of force and vehemence. It wasn't. I was never going to do that. It wasn't going to be for me. She's been with him, I think, 38 years. They've got 3 grown-up children, and she fancies this civil partnership. And I'm still struggling a bit, and I'm not being disingenuous. I really mean it.
No, I know.
To kind of grasp what it is about marriage that you would so vehemently object to, apart from the religious side of it, which I understand could be not something that you're in favour of. But the rest of it, what was it about it that you so didn't like?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and I think a lot of it does come down to the symbolism, although I'm going to have to look into this a bit more, so I'd love to hear anybody on the phone that can explain it to us in terms of the legalities. Yeah. Because I think, as far as I understand the way it's being talked about in the press currently, it's about civil partnership giving you the legal protection and support that equal people in a relationship need from each other, and in order to protect themselves and their children after a breakup or as a death, you know, so that you're not left unconnected.
Yeah, it gives you become next of kin. You get to inherit each other's money without paying 40% inheritance tax. And you get that legal thing of, you know, of a spouse without being a spouse. You're the civil partner. But why was it that you so kept thinking when you were getting married, I don't want the conventions, I don't want to do what most married people do? What didn't you like about them?
I think, well, it's interesting, because I was just saying to your researcher, I think the interesting thing is the trend that we're seeing about the unwedding. Yeah. And I think you're right, is that it's almost that with a civil partnership, you don't have to be resisting or fighting your moral, your political, your cultural issues with the institution and the history of marriage, which can be and is sort of still, the legacy of that does feel quite anti-woman, often the idea of giving away a woman and the dowry and all that kind of stuff that comes with it. So I think a lot of it is historical. And what I was just saying to your researcher is, we've noticed, I work in the wedding industry, and what we've noticed in the last few years is people literally saying, we're having an unwedding. Now, I think that's so interesting that people want to celebrate their love. They want to spend a lot of time and money preparing an amazing event that all their friends and family come to. But they're using the language of actually saying it's an unwedding, because they are so determined to ditch the traditions. You know, they won't be walked down the aisle, they won't change their name. So the women and the men in a heterosexual couple will both give a speech. It can be, you almost feel like you don't have the constraints that you have to then reject if you're having a civil partnership. You can just have an amazing party that celebrates your love and not your your marriage, your love and your life together. The commitment is the same. You just don't have to use that term. I think we're seeing that.
It's just that I don't know, these days whether this is a kind of it's almost kind of like rejecting something that's already been rejected. It's kind of an anachronism because so many people just craft their own wedding anyway. I mean, Robert Elms and his wife, they went there on the bus. They did it at the register office. They went out for a delightful, exquisite lunch for 4 or something afterwards. And then they had an incredibly long and magnificent honeymoon that went on for about 8 weeks. In other words, they tailor-made and bespoke their own wedding a long, long time ago. And loads of people will be taken up the aisle by their mum rather than their dad, either because they haven't got a dad or they don't like their dad, or they've got a single mum or whatever it is. Loads of people. The woman gives the speech. We know that Meghan Markle gave the speech at her wedding to Prince Harry, and also she took herself up the aisle. Remember that? She wasn't having any of it. She just and that's a royal wedding, for God's sake, with the absolute kind of restriction of all protocol that you could possibly have imposed upon a wedding, and she still did it her way. Good luck to her. Exactly. But what I'm saying is, it just seems to me that the idea that you're rejecting with every ounce of your fibre, years and centuries of oppression and male domination, I think that's already happened long ago. That brides and grooms haven't wanted to have much truck with it, really, and haven't. They just do what they feel like doing.
But I guess that is the point, isn't it? Is that yes, but people are having to sort of actively do it. We're all having to talk about Meghan Markle doing something that's different because she's getting married, or Robert Elms, rather than just saying, actually, there's a thing that gay couples have had for a while, which is great, that we can also do, which we don't have to even be Mr. and Mrs., we don't have to be married, we can just be, we're in a civil partnership, they're my partner.
And you don't find it terribly unromantic, dry, legal, like a contract with your insurance company?
No, because then you're implying, you're absolutely defending the point that Fiona was making, because then you're saying, if you get married, it's love and marriage and romantic and beautiful. And if you have a civil partnership, it's dry and cold and miserable and legal and financial. Why shouldn't a civil partnership have all the love and all the joy and all the ritual and all the ceremony? It's just not a marriage. Why shouldn't straight people have the choice that gay people have had, and why shouldn't gay people have? It's about equality. We should have choices. I think it's great. I can't see an issue. I can't see why.
I don't see any reason at all why they shouldn't have the choice. I think you're absolutely right. I don't see any reason at all why they shouldn't be equally entitled to have what anyone else is having. I completely agree with you. But still, it's hard to understand why people would make that choice, I think, and then imply that it's just as romantic and full of frou-frou and optimism and high hopes as a wedding.
I just don't think romance has to be connected inextricably with the idea of marriage and the institution of marriage. And I think the couples that we're seeing coming through Patchwork, which is my business, which is an alternative wedding gift list, is showing that the alternative approach to what has currently for straight people been marriage, as you say, we're already sort of flexing it, pushing the rules and sort of challenging.
I just want to say, my producer just said, excellent call. We're all going to go and have a look at your website. Do you have a website we can have a look at, Patchwork?
I do.
Okay, we're going to do that in a minute. We're going to do that in a sec. I've got to move on, Olivia, because I've got a guest waiting. But thank you so much for the call. Very interesting indeed. Olivia with her alternative wedding list business. Fascinating. Right, given the choice, if you get started in the morning, would you opt for a good old bacon sarnie? Or instead would you choose an avocado sandwich? An advert for Costa Coffee has been banned for urging customers to buy a bacon roll rather than avocados. 2 listeners complained that the radio commercial discouraged people from opting for fresh fruit, and forthwith the commercial was banned. Jane Beadle, you may remember with great affection, was on Great British Bake Off in 2016 and joins us on the show. Hi Jane, morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. So there were 2 objections only to this ad, which said, yummy, scrummy, let's have a bacon sandwich, who wants a boring old avocado, or something of that ilk. I'd never heard it, but I'm assuming it's something like that, saying, core bacon sandwiches, we love them, avocado, virtuous but dull. What do you think of an ad that says something like that?
Well, like you, I didn't hear it, but from what I gather, it was all very tongue-in-cheek and quite amusing.
Yeah.
And we all have bought those avocados. I think it was playing on the point that you buy your avocados in the supermarket, and they're either right there and then, or tomorrow they're bad, or they're hard and then they're bad, and they never get nice fruit. I mean, we've all had that. I think we're in danger of losing our sense of humour. I mean, I'm on a dodgy side of the fence sometimes because I do an awful lot with sugar and cake and
yes,
bacon
yes.
and take a fair bit of stick for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if it was done hugely tongue-in-cheek and with a great deal of humour, then I'm not going to take it too seriously. But I suppose we ought to be encouraging people to eat more healthily. And maybe they could have said, if your avocados at home are hard and horrid, we have lovely ones here.
But they were advertising their bacon roll. That's what they wanted people to buy, didn't they? And as far as we knew, if you pay for the ad, you can advertise, provided the product you're advertising is legal, isn't going to poison you, whatever it is. You can advertise whatever you're trying to sell, can't you, if you can pay for the advertising?
Absolutely, you can.
And seriously, Jane, are you getting a lot of stick for being a baker? Obviously, you're a hugely talented baker. Do people say, why are you baking? You should instead be making a green salad and get very cross?
Well, there are some of them out there that say we should be encouraging people to eat lots of sugar with all the obesity problem. We need to be more responsible. Ban bake-off. I think somebody said the other day in one of the broadsheets we ought to be banning bake-off because it's as bad for you as alcohol and cigarettes.
For God's sake. What do you think of that?
Well, I think you take the fun and the joy out of absolutely everything if you ban those things.
People might think the same about banning an ad for a bacon roll, mightn't they?
It would seem that a couple of people and the advertising standards people do think you ought to ban ads for bacon rolls. I think we're going to have a pretty miserable life if all we can eat is salad and quinoa.
At least you can pronounce it. There's a whole thing in the papers about how no one can pronounce it. You spell it quinoa and everyone wants to say it like that. Jane, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Jane Beagle, their Great British Bake Off finalist in 2016, is saying, oh, come on, relax a little bit. You're allowed to surely a bacon roll. And it's true, isn't it, that every time you buy an avocado, if you bother to buy an avocado, it's either too ripe or it's too hard and you never get to the perfect moment to eat the wretched thing. So why don't you just have a bacon roll upon which you can rely, etc. and so forth. I'll tell you what's coming up after 9 o'clock. We're going to be meeting live and in person the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan, Cosmo magazine. If you used to be a Cosmo girl, if you're still a Cosmo girl, if you're a Cosmo woman through and through, you will be avidly listening to what she has to say. Her first book is called The Discomfort Zone. In other words, get yourself out of your comfort zone where life is utterly horrible, but carry on, push on through the discomfort and make something of yourself. How do you do that? Because obviously your urge is to duck out of it and get back to the bit where you feel comfortable. Nobody fancies the discomfort zone, do they? She's going to tell us all about that, and that'll be after the news and the weather at 9 o'clock.
You've lost those memories, haven't you?
With the BBC Radio London travel delays of over an hour on Grand Central, Great Northern, Hull trains, London North Eastern Railway and Thameslink services in and out of King's Cross. It's all following an earlier incident on the line between Peterborough and Stevenage. All the lines are open now, but this disruption is expected to last until around 11 o'clock. Greater Anglia and TfL rail services between Liverpool Street and Shenfield running with severe delays still. South Western Railway running with delays of up to 10 minutes on services via Clarendon due to local speed restrictions, and also services London bound via Rains Park running with delays of 15 minutes following an earlier passenger illness. There's a broken down van on the anti-clockwise M25 as you head out of junction 25 for the A10 at Enfield towards junction 24 at Potters Bar. Can't see that it's causing much in the way of delay actually, but the inside lane is blocked. You are down to 3 lanes in the area. Still slow for the A2 East Rochester way, westbound into Bexley Heath from junction 2 of the M25 following an earlier breakdown. Northbound traffic on the Blackwall Tunnel southern approach slow now from Blackwall Lane, so those delays from the Woolwich Road flyover have eased off nicely. North Circular heavy eastbound Colney Hatch Lane up towards Arnos Grove, and the lower Richmond Road looking slow heading out of Mortlake in towards the South Circular at Chalkers Corner. If you're off to London City Airport, give yourself a bit of extra time. The Connaught Bridge remains closed for maintenance work. Pippa Sparks, BBC Radio London, your next travel at 9:30.
On digital radio, smartphone and speaker, and on 94.9 FM.
This is London.
This is BBC Radio London.
London's News at 9. I'm Katie Shanahan. Good morning. Theresa May will close the Conservative conference today by declaring that Britain's future after Brexit is full of promise. She'll also announce that fuel duty will be frozen for the 9th year in a row. After Boris Johnson's fresh attack on her Chequers plan, Mrs May will urge Tories to show they are decent, moderate and patriotic. The Cabinet Office Minister David Lidington said the party would back Mrs May on Brexit.
What we'll see this afternoon is the membership rallying behind the Prime Minister because they know that in her they've got a leader who's putting the country first, who's motivated only by a sense of patriotic duty to get the best deal for every part of the UK.
A man has been stabbed on a busy London Overground train just before it pulled into an East London station. The victim was attacked as the train travelled to Hackney Central shortly before 6 o'clock last night. One man has been arrested. The train was activated at the station and services resumed just 2 hours later. Well, BBC Radio London's Greg Mackenzie tells us about what the witness Hazel Orton said she saw.
Hazel went on to tell us how a wave of people came running past her. There was shouting and commotion, and then the emergency alarm went off. She goes on to say, I looked to my right and there was a guy on the floor. Another commuter, Nick Comia, says that he saw a guy with a knife in his hand walking towards him. He claims he was shouting a lot, but he couldn't really get a sense of what the suspect was saying. He says the police then arrived very quickly. They grabbed the suspect and had him hauled against a police car.
Supplies of urgently needed food and water have begun to reach people on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi 5 days after it was struck by a devastating earthquake and tsunami. Officials say the number of people known to have died has risen above 1,400. A report has found that 24,000 commercial properties in London are lying empty and instead they could be turned into temporary housing or workspaces. Research from the Centre for London discovered the floor space of unused buildings and found that it amounted to 1.8 million square metres of land. The think tank said temporary schemes like box parks and gardens have proven popular, but there was space for more. Well, Nicholas Bizzetti, who's the research manager at the Centre for London and is one of the people responsible for compiling this report, told Vanessa what they had found.
We found that London has a huge potential for filling up empty spaces with housing and workspaces. It's just quite incredible, really, that in a city where there's so much pressure on land and it's so hard to find a space to live or to work, there's still that much empty space, really. So we're saying, here are the ways that we can put these spaces back into use. They can have big value, and they can work in pretty much every part of the city. It's not just kind of your pop-up in Shoreditch.
The coroner at the inquest into the Westminster Bridge attack is due to deliver his conclusions today. 5 people, including a police officer, were killed by Khalid Massoud in March last year. The inquest into his death will open tomorrow in front of a jury. BBC research suggests that rents for tenants in their 20s are becoming harder to afford, especially if they want to live alone. In 2/3 of British postcode areas, the rent for a one-bedroom flat is more than 30% of the average income of that age group. Well, Morgan Twinning, who's in her 20s, says housing costs are a real problem for her generation.
Myself and my partner are living with his parents at the moment, whilst we're saving for a mortgage. The reason why we decided to do that was because we couldn't possibly rent and save at the same time. My friends definitely struggle. A lot of their money is used up in just their rent alone.
And in the past hour, it's been announced that Zoe Ball is to be the new host of the BBC Radio 2 Breakfast Show. She'll take over from Chris Evans after his 8 years in the chair in January. Chris announced his successor on this morning's show with Zoe by his side. She said she was delighted.
I am a crazy mix of elation, wanting to burst into tears, thinking about running away, everything. All right. But mainly thrilled. And all night I've not been able to sleep because, you know what, I've been singing to myself all night.
Come on.
How do you like your eggs in the morning? Come on with the kiss.
Now with London's weather, here's Kate Kinsella.
Another mild day across London. We will often see quite a bit of cloud, but the cloud will break up and we'll also get some sunny spells, some bright spells. It's going to feel warm again today. We're looking at a maximum of 20 Celsius this afternoon. Now overnight tonight, very similar conditions. Quite a bit of cloud, but 1 or 2 clear spells. The wind falls out though, which means we could see a little bit of mist and fog developing by dawn. So a murky start to Thursday. Minimum temperature though still in double figures, around 11 or 12 12 Celsius in central London. The mist and fog will lift tomorrow morning to a day of sunny spells again, temperatures staying up in the high teens.
BBC Radio London, it's 6 minutes past 9.
This is London.
Londoners are a class of their own.
Sometimes you hear things you never thought you would hear on the radio.
At the end of the show, you're better informed.
This is BBC Radio London.
With Vanessa Feltz.
Well, I've been billing her all morning, haven't I? I've been giving her star and maximum billing. That's because I'm dead impressed by this book, actually, and partly by the way you sort of absorb it without feeling like it's medicine. She's not Julie Andrews. She's not giving us the spoonful of sugar either. She's just a very good writer. Not only that, she happens to be the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine. Her name's Farah Storr, and I'm very pleased indeed to welcome you to the studio. Good morning, and nice to see you.
Good morning, Vanessa.
Your book is called The Discomfort Zone. We'll talk about that in a minute, but what I'd like to talk about first is this idea that you are this august personage, the chief, the editor-in-chief of Cosmo. It's a massive deal in the magazine world, huge, and it's so aspirational. I would imagine that the very idea of achieving such great lofty heights would have been intimidating in the extreme. How did you do it?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I was saying to someone just the other night, you know, Cosmo, interestingly, it was the magazine I always used to apply for jobs for.
Well,
never got in. They would never let me in. And so when I got offered the editorship, it was really scary because it's a heritage brand. It comes with a lot of background. And yeah, it was scary. But, you know, I always say, like, if I'm not a little bit scared by something, I'm probably not working hard enough at it. So it's been good. The last 3 years has been a really good time at Cosmo.
But obviously, you didn't just linger about doing something else and without realising they picked you. You must have. Were you not angling for it and campaigning for it and sort of going all out to get it?
Do you know what? I wasn't. Because, I mean, probably it's really interesting because they would never let me on to work at Cosmo. I never saw myself, interestingly, as a Cosmo girl growing up.
Right.
And actually, before I got to Cosmo, I was editing a magazine called Women's Health, which was kind of like a start-up.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was really hard. It was really scrappy. And I remember it was really hard. And then I got to the third year of Women's Health, and I remember turning to my husband and going, do you know what? It feels quite comfortable now. Like, I can finally sit back and enjoy it, and I can leave on time. Because, you know, editing, as we discussed, it's hard.
Yes,
you don't go into it unless you love it. And then my CEO at the time said, look, you know, what do you think about Cosmo? And so I had a real decision to make because I loved Women's Health because I'd started it from nothing. 2 members of staff was very much my project. And it was like, you either stay where you are and it will be a lovely job staying at Women's Health, you can do it with your eyes closed, or you make the next leap. And I was really scared, but I decided, you know, editorships don't come along very often. Now is the time to do this.
I mean, people will remember Cosmo from before they were born. You know, I remember reading my Auntie Carol's copies, kind of, I purloined them secretly. I particularly enjoyed, of course, all the sex advice. I was probably about 8 years old, had no business reading it. It absolutely formed my character, my everything about me, really. And actually, all I ever dreamed of was a life in women's magazines. It's all I wanted to do. There was something about reading a women's magazine that made you feel an insider, that made you feel empowered in a way, that made you feel informed, that made you feel excited, it made you feel sometimes utterly confused because as a young kid you didn't really know what you were writing about or reading about, but you knew that you fancied being part of that world. It was glamorous in an amazingly kind of enticing sort of a way. And I used to spend money on magazines. My father used to go mad. How can you afford it? Why are you wasting your money? And I couldn't say to him, well, it's going to be my career, because I didn't know it would be. I had no sort of good cut. It's just I wanted them. I just really, really, and in fact, I still do. I still love magazines. Having said all of which, this is a very, very difficult time for the industry, isn't it? Because people are getting their news and their fashion and their celebrity input and everything else online. They're not bothering to buy them in the way that they did.
Yeah, I mean, it is very hard. And actually, just going back to what you said just very quickly, it's I didn't even know you could get jobs on magazines. You know, growing up, I grew up in Salford. People didn't get jobs on magazines. But you're right, by the time I got to magazines, the industry was in a really hard way. And it still is, let's be honest, it's going through a difficult period. However, that said, you know, what Cosmo has had to do, we've actually, interestingly, when I joined, one of the first things I did was I looked through all the old kind of copies from the 60s. And I was like, you know what, this magazine was famous before even all of the sex tips. It was about career and investigative journalism. And I was like, do you know what, that's one of the things that, you know, some digital outlets do it brilliantly. I said, but it's the one thing that really is the genius of print. And I said, actually, we need to make it more magazine-y. We're doing really well, but also, you know, we have massive audience on digital, massive audience on Snapchat. We have Cosmo houses where we house young women. We're working on a sex education project with schools. So I always say I'm not... I don't mind where consumers reach me, what platform it is, because my feeling is it's kind of like a virtuous circle. You will come and meet the magazine at some point. But you're right, it's a hard time.
Last night on TV was 30 years of This Morning. I first appeared on This Morning in 1992. 26 years later, I'm back on This Morning. It's a really weird, strange, odd feeling of nothing changing but everything changing. You know, it's revisiting yourself in an utterly weird way, very strange. But one of the features I think that's emerged from this 30 years retrospective is, what are women predominantly interested in? And the answer is exactly the same things as they were 30 years ago. In fact, if you look at the format for the very first programme 30 years ago and you look at today's, they're almost identical. Women care about the same things. They care about relationships, they care about news and personal stories from other people who've been through adversity or been through some kind of unusual circumstance. They care about health, they care about fashion, they care about sex, they care about their families, they care about what their homes look like, they care about cooking, they care about all the things, they care about making a living, they care about careers. Nothing's changed. Everything and nothing have changed, don't you think, in that time?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, people want to read stories, and that has never changed. I mean, going back thousands and thousands of years, it's human interest stories. You're absolutely right. It hasn't changed. But what I think did change, and what happened to the industry perhaps a little bit, was we looked at the culture changing and how people were getting information. And I remember some magazines I picked up a few years ago, they were looking like digital, so the copy was much shorter. And my gut feeling was, this is not why you pick up magazines. Magazines are about discovery, they're about turning a page and going, I didn't know I was going to read about that today. And that, you're absolutely right, that has never changed. Relationships, sex, money, career, moving forward with life. It's the same as it was for my mother. It's the same as it is for me now. Underneath it all, there are different challenges, but it is the same.
So tell me, where then came this desire to write your first book? Congratulations on it, The Discomfort Zone. What did you feel that you wanted to communicate that you weren't already communicating in Cosmo?
Well, I think a lot of it I was communicating in Cosmo, but they always say, don't they? It's like, that's why second books are always terrible. Your first book kind of takes a lifetime to write because it's in your head. And I think my whole life, I always found that the things, I mean, look, I always say I'm not hugely talented, but what I do have is I work really, really hard. And
do you mean that, though?
Yeah, I think I've become talented because I know the direction of travel in which I need to be, and I have worked and worked at it.
All right, just tell people what that means in like plain normal speak. Well, I know the direction of travel in which I need to be. What does that mean? I know where I'm going, or I know where my product is going, or I know how to get where I'm going?
Right, so I knew I always wanted to be an editor, and I knew that actually if I knew the path on which to go, if I just worked and I grafted at it, because that's my feeling, is most of life is the grind, it's grinding away. Success is like this tiny bit at the top. And so I think the more that I grafted away, the more talented I became at what I do. You know, it's pattern recognition. I'm a good editor now because I've been doing it for a long time. But I've forgotten your question now.
My question was, what did you want to write the book for? Because, you know, I wondered whether people were getting the info from the magazine, or there was something that you felt that you needed more time, and you needed to expand, and you wanted a nice pocket-sized book that people go, hang on a minute, right, I'm really stuck, I'm in trouble, I'm out of my depth, I don't know what to do. I've always been an imposter anyway, which is how most women and most men feel all the time, which is everyone thinks I'm a teacher, everyone imagines I'm a cab driver, really I don't know where I'm going, I'm totally lost, oh my God, I'm going to be found out at any second, and somehow or other I've got to find some kind of reserves or resilience to get me through this horrible bit till I get onto the next bit. That happens almost every day to lots of people, doesn't it?
It does, and actually the whole imposter syndrome is interesting, because I always say it's not a bad thing, because it's the thing that keeps you going. It goes back to the women's health. If I was sat back, you know, with my feet upon the table, you know, thinking it's brilliant, I know what I'm doing, I don't think I would be working as, you know, hard, pushing against kind of obstacles and challenges. I mean, I wrote the book because I always found that when I put myself into difficult situations, that's kind of when the magic happened. You know, when I took on Cosmo, it was really hard, I'm not going to lie. We had to do a number of changes. But, you know, when you can either decide, can't you, whether you embrace the fear, or you see the fear as challenge. And you only have a couple of moments in which to decide, because, you know, all those heart palpitations and sweaty palms you get when you're scared, we've been told, well, that's because you're scared. What culturally we don't say to people is, those are exactly the same feelings you get when you're excited and you're challenged. And I've always thought, Vanessa, that human beings need a load, they need a bit of struggle. You know, we hear about lottery winners, they suddenly, all their dreams come true, and their happiness, it flatlines. You know, they don't get it happier. So that's why I wanted to write the book. The reason I'm really happy the book is out now is because I do think the culture is going through a bit of a sea change, and, you know, things like all these safe spaces in universities, people being coddled to the extreme, particularly millennials and
well, I'm sure you've seen the story today about undergraduates, I think it's at Northern University, being told not to clap, but to use jazz hands instead in case people are frightened by the noise. That's a real story. It's not fabricated. It's incredible. And various people have been tweeted, blimey, you should have told that to our great-grandfathers in the trenches and seen what they thought of the noise. Bloody, oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that on the radio, but, you know, beeping heck, you know, for goodness sake, grow up, develop some backbone. And so that's what we're going to be talking about next. My guest, the editor-in-chief of Cosmo, Farah Storr, is here. Her book is called The Discomfort Zone. If you feel that you've ploughed through it, how did you do it? What was it? What did you draw upon? Because lots of people will head for the hills, or they'll just think, I don't fancy that, I'm scared, I don't know how to do it, I'm going to be found out, I'm going to look utterly ridiculous, and looking ridiculous is my ultimate nightmare. I don't want anyone to think I've failed, I don't want to fail, so I'll just stay where I am and just stay in my own little silo doing what I'm comfortable doing forever and ever. Amen, leave me alone. That's what lots of people think. Are you somebody who managed somehow to climb out of it and get through the difficult bit and endure the discomfort and turn it somehow into triumph? Have you done that thing? And if so, how did you do it? Or are you thinking, let me get a book, I just need to read it, and when I find out what she did, I'll do it, and then I'll manage to get myself out of whatever situation I'm in and into one that's something more exciting, adventurous, more fun, maybe. Fun, are we allowed any of that? Failure? Are we allowed any of that? I'm going to be asking her all these questions straight after this trail.
This is London.
Many of the best aspects of my show come from you lot, from the listeners. It's an interaction. It's an interaction between me and you, but also between you and you. You're sharing memories with each other.
Robert Elms.
We're all in this together. That sounds a bit corny, but it doesn't sound corny when you hear it.
Weekdays and Saturday mornings from 10. This is BBC Radio London.
So the book is called The Discomfort Zone. Let me just read you this. It's just been handed to me. It's from Fiona. She says, I can't believe you're talking about trying something out of your comfort zone today. I've recently done just that. I'm a London cabbie. And this afternoon, I'm coming in to BBC Radio London to chat with Jo Cook, she's my colleague and friend, about being a cabbie in my very first children's book. She says, you don't know if you can do something until you've tried. Tell me about fear of failure.
Well, fear of failure, I mean, again, culturally we've been told, I mean, don't fail, you know, because, I mean, look, in the classroom, we always talk about, you know, the kid that got the right answer, that was the child that was serenaded.
Absolutely.
The kid that got it wrong, you kept quiet about it. And it's wrong, you know, in Japan they do the opposite. It's actually the child that gets, that doesn't get the right answer, the whole group is brought together to help that kid work on what actually they're getting wrong. And I think that's the thing about failure, you know. Failure, there's two different ways of failure. Failure by carelessness and laziness, it's not the sort of failure you want, but I think failure where you're trying something new and there's no information on what you've got to do, that's to be applauded as long as you look back on what went wrong. And I think that's the thing, I think some people are so scared of going, oh my God, I got it wrong, I don't want to look back. That's the thing, you've got to examine why you got something wrong, because once you examine it, you have a piece of information that you didn't have before.
I must say, often we've had entrepreneurs of various different kinds, people very financially successful on the show, and often they have a whole stream of failures. They've got businesses that folded along the way, ideas that they floated that didn't work, directorships they took that they had to leave because it just wasn't happening there. They don't seem in the least ashamed. Not in the least. They don't go, well, I'm not going to tell you what happened in 1987. They say in 87 I had this monumental failure. Well, I picked myself up. We tried something else, and they don't seem to think that it's a horrible blot on their career landscape, or indeed that it was unexpected. Whereas I think people are raising, particularly, maybe it's just women, people can correct me if they don't agree with this, but to sort of see if you try really hard, you're diligent, you're punctual, you're not drunk, You know, you're not late. You're somebody who's done your homework. You will succeed. You will then build on that success. You'll be a sort of transcendental, you know, cosmic, stratospheric star, and nothing will ever go wrong because you're a good person doing all the hard work, which of course isn't true. Even if you do all the work, and even if you do really apply yourself and you are a good person, you can come crashing down in flames. But the idea that that's normal and in fact almost inevitable and in part of most people's life story, that doesn't seem to be put over enough, I think.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think you're right. Business people are really good at doing it because they take risks.
Yeah.
And, you know, they take risks, which is why a lot of us, that's why they're so successful. But of course, what comes with risk is a lot of the time you're going to fail. I mean, look, Silicon Valley, they're obsessed with failure. The guy that owns Amazon, he is obsessed with it. I think every shareholder letter talks about failure.
What does he say about it?
That it's amazing, that it is so important. I remember he had this quote where they'd had one of their products, it was their phone, had been a colossal failure. And I think he wrote, to paraphrasing here, in one of the shareholder letters that he said, if you think that's a failure, we're working on much bigger failures right now. And so he knows, he understands implicitly that to get to the top, you are going to encounter failure. So you've got to be okay with it, you've got to be comfortable with it.
And in fact, in the book, you talk about a job that you got along the way. That when you got there, it just wasn't going to be the right thing for you. You weren't the right fit, it didn't feel right, it wasn't that you weren't clever, it wasn't that you weren't talented, it was just kind of a combination of factors that just weren't working out.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was a magazine I had always wanted to work on. And it wasn't. And I think for a long time, I just wasn't right. And actually, Vanessa, I think the truth is, I always think, particularly in journalism, you all know this, you move along a lot because at the beginning, you don't earn much money, so you want to earn more money. And I think with this particular job, I was genuinely out of my depth. And I think for the longest time, the easiest thing to do is to blame the world around you, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, it's their fault, I had a bad boss. And actually, it's taken me years to look back on that job and go, no, I wasn't right for the job. And of course, you can only change the things that you can control.
Could you have made yourself right, or were you just not right?
No, I think I stayed there 11 months, and I got to a point where I thought, at some point, you have to know the difference between, and I talk about this in the book, a slog, which is where it is so relentlessly hard, it is a really difficult job, and it changes the colour of your whole world. And a grinding job, which is one which is really hard and really challenging. And I think with that particular job, it was a slog, and it was a room that I couldn't get out of. And you know what, though? I always look back and I always say to everyone, it's really important to have a job where it's a slog, where you're really in the teeth of kind of despair, but difficulty, because then you know the difference between a challenging job and a job which is just a really bad fit for you. And so that job really, I look back at it now, it was a really seminal job for me to have had.
Right, now I'm going to bring up #MeToo, because why wouldn't you be the editor-in-chief of Cosmo? You need to be one of the right people to talk about this too. And one of the things that women have endured over decades, if not longer, is this feeling of powerlessness.
Right.
That you know that what's being done to you is inappropriate, you know you don't want it, and you know you haven't invited it, and you know it's not your responsibility. You weren't doing something enticing or seductive, you were just doing your job. That's all. You weren't inviting a damn thing. However, this thing is happening to you at work, whether it's verbal, whether it's physical, whatever it is. But the person doing it, the perpetrator, is somebody in control, in command. You know, they've got your career in their hands. You know, they can fire you, they can demote you, they can ignore you, they can sideline you, and sometimes even worse than all those things, they can put it about that you're humorless, you know, you're no fun to work with, you're not a team player, you're just one of these prudish, difficult, you know, uncooperative people that nobody wants to go anywhere near, and they could absolutely, you know, nuke your career along the way. And so women have had to, I think, give the nod to all sorts of stuff that they haven't felt comfortable with. And I wonder if part of, you know, if you're addressing that sort of situation in your book, because talk about a discomfort zone, that's majorly it, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I don't address that in the book, but the book could absolutely, you know, adhere to that. I mean, look, you know, there is a conversation going on at the moment which absolutely has to happen. Now, do I have the answer if you are a young woman who is trapped in a situation where you have a boss who is behaving inappropriately? I don't, because, you know, whilst I'm an idealist, on some hand I'm also a pragmatist. And so it's like you have to make the decision what's right for you. You can go that you complain, I would say you should. You absolutely should. But obviously, I suppose the thing is, you have to expect what's going to come of it is going to be difficult. And I would always say you have to speak up, because even if you have to go through the discomfort of speaking up, it paves the way for everyone else.
You would also hope that these days, and I think we talked to, I can't remember who they were yesterday, but they've done a survey about this, and on women now better empowered to come forward than they were as a result of #MeToo, and the force at society, thank you, and the answer was yes, because actually all you really need to do is just say that now.
Yeah, and of course, one of the brilliant things, there's a lot that's not good about social media. The good thing about social media is you can connect instantly with other women. Years ago we didn't have that. You felt very much like a lone voice doing it alone.
Yeah.
Now, at the click of a button, you can find, it's the group. The group can be really bad in some ways, but the group in some instances here can be a really good thing, because you are not alone in doing this, and there's a real moment now that you need to speak up if this is happening to you. You have to.
And also, if you say with a broad smile to whoever it is, gosh, it's a little bit Me Too, isn't it?
Will be an incredible addition
Me Too me this morning, do you? Ha ha ha, and you walk off and look as if you're taking it with some kind of sense of humour, then maybe you're raising a red flag, and they think, oh God, was that actually a bit Me Too-ish? Oh gosh, better stop it. Maybe. I mean, at least you've got the tools now, because you've got the phrase at your disposal.
And language is powerful. You're absolutely right. That whole phrase. Who would have thought those two words together?
offering a greater purpose.
I had a guest in here. He started calling me sweetheart, darling, and saying how gorgeous I look on air. Totally inappropriate to me. I think some kind of political character. I just went, gosh, shades of Me Too. He shut up pretty sharp, but she wasn't going to go on with that one for too long. I'm just being handed this from Catherine, who says, I'd be interested to know how your guest, this is a very good question, Catherine, thank you. She says, how your guest defines success. She says it's often equated with making lots of money, but for most people, success is about doing a good job well, whether it's cleaning your bathroom or negotiating a delicate issue with a child.
Yeah, I think she's absolutely right. For me, I mean, look, I would never have gone into journalism if it was about money. Never was.